Welcome to episode 109 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger. Unfortunately, Tim will not be with us this week, but we'll certainly be back subsequent weeks. So we won't get the amazing shout outs that he normally does. So he'll have more for the next one. In the meantime, we'll take a quick pause for our sponsor slots to add them in, and we'll be right back.
Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance.
Welcome back. Super excited to introduce our guest who is doing something what I think is pretty unique in the space. David Bradley with Qpilot, which is a subscription company that has a focus, not exclusively focused, but a focus on B2B replenishment and B2B e-commerce. And you guys are doing quite a bit of work with WooCommerce and Shopify B2B. So I really want to dig into that more since it's a topic we haven't covered as much as we'd like. So David, please just introduce yourself, give some background on Qpilot, and then, let's go from there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Isaiah. It's great to be here on the pod. David Bradley, joining you here from Denver, Colorado. I split my time between Austin, Texas, and Denver. We also have some of our team out in Salt Lake. So what's up to the Utah folks? Always a pleasure to go out there and be in their community as well. My background basically, and how I came to be the founder at Qpilot, is I worked with a lot of different operators back in my NetSuite consulting days, helping implement e-commerce for different types of brands, different types of operations. You might have learned about Suite Commerce if you ever got into NetSuite, and I would frequently come in to help build integrations for what it didn't do at the time. One of the things it didn't do was offer sort of this auto ship subscription model, and we were implementing those for D2C brands, yes, but also for business to business. And the reason why is they wanted a better experience and sales enablement for their purchase orders. And one of the things that we learned to design into what eventually became the Qpilot platform is actual last mile delivery outcomes, and bringing that experience that typically you only know today is something that you see in the cart checkout, of seeing when, what shipping rate is going to get the delivery there at what time, and bringing that into a repeat ordering channel so that purchasers and subscribers actually have some last mile expectations and visibility that they can control. And we found that in a B2B context, this is an extremely high value because of the difficulty of being a procurement manager or a purchasing manager. You ask them that question, how much does it matter to you that your delivery for packaging supplies that you're going to use to create your finished goods arrives on time? What would you do to make that purchase order arrive on time? Anything. They'll do anything. They'll drive to the border. They'll clear it from customs. Anything they can do to keep their operations running, right, that we can help with. So we learned a lot implementing on both sides with D2C and B2B. B2B wanting the experience that is a little simpler, more accessible, more self-service that the D2C subscriptions are offering, but B2B needing a lot more care for how their operations and their existing services that they use to ship and fulfill and procure, plan for their business on the demand side, how that's rationalized for them, and use that in a subscription channel.
Did you find that you started kind of in this NetSuite ecosystem, and now I think you've seen a lot of that mature into things like Shopify on the e-commerce side? Are they still often using a NetSuite or an ERP, and that's more in the back office and Shopify is more the front end? Or are you seeing some of these folks just abandon, the ERP entirely and move to a different kind of operation?
It's a great question. So very frequently we will see our omni-channel brands, the ones that typically are doing B2B and D2C, they are running ERP systems with NetSuite, Sage, your big players. Generally, you'll see that because they have a lot of operations that they have to scale. And there's a lot that those ERP systems offer that help them scale their business. With the more smaller size business, it is kind of frequent that you'll notice that the shopping cart is kind of the central operating system of that business. They're using Shopify, BigCommerce or WooCommerce to actually like record their inventory and report everything into the shopping cart as a source of truth. So it's kind of interesting. Our B2B operators, they're typically running ERPs, and we see that at Qpilot because we have an API, we have webhooks, and they are usually synchronizing data between the ERP system and, say, the Qpilot platform, which is going to help them plan those future deliveries. You can think of Qpilot as literally that, an automated order queue, where it's telling you these SKUs at these times to these locations. So that helps them with their ERP reporting. But in the D2C space and the smaller B2B space, we do often see that they're just running the shopping cart at first.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that's kind of the natural evolution of a business, is like you probably don't need an ERP up to a certain size. But once you get to a certain level of like inventory, multi-channel, B2B, B2C complexity, you probably need some sort of order management, at least order management solution, and then maybe ERP, which is kind of order management and accounting all in one. Just to kind of give people a little bit more understanding of Qpilot, I think most people in the Shopify or e-commerce ecosystem are familiar with solutions like a Recharge, maybe an Order Groove, some of these, pretty, larger VC-backed subscription companies. Like how do you explain what you guys do in relation to them? And definitely you seem to have this like detailed B2B expertise that I don't think we see from them, but I'm sure you get asked this a lot in the space.
Yeah, quite a bit. You could imagine on demos, it's one of the top questions these days is, how are you different than other subscription apps, right?
Yeah.
I appreciate the question a lot. So there's two things that we focus on at Qpilot that's quite a bit different than a subscription app or a subscription platform on its own. One is this focus of an order queue instead of billing plans. Most subscription applications, Shopify subscriptions included, they're really built, from the ground up as a technology to maintain a billing plan, right?
Almost like payments. They're essentially payment options, really, is like a recurring payments. Yeah,
absolutely. And even at Qpilot as a SaaS company, we run billing operation software, revenue ops software, to help with our own SaaS recurring billing, things like that. But it's tough when you're managing billing plans and your focus is on the subscribe and save or auto ship of physical goods. Yeah. Because now a lot of things don't really play nice with you, right? The things that typically work with subscription software are payment gateways or marketing automation. Things like that tend to plug and play pretty well with subscription software. But things like shipping integrations or ERP integrations, for example, they expect order data, not billing plan data. So at Qpilot, we take a different approach to this, is an automated order queue, orders that are scheduled for the future. And it allows us to actually interface with a lot of the integrations that work with your shopping cart and checkout in a very similar manner. And that really rationalizes it for the merchants that use Qpilot. They can see orders that are queued up for the future. That data is reported to them as SKUs, not subscription items and subscription plans. And
so
it allows
different items. You could have some customizations around what is in that subscription, or you have a lot more control, I assume, over the order
exactly
in those recurring, or it's almost like future delivery dates. And I assume you can make it a lot easier to skip a date. Let's say someone's like, hey, we're not in the office for January, we could skip that one, and then like you have this visibility into the future orders, right? Kind of thing.
Exactly. And that kind of brings me to the second piece that makes us very different, is because we only focus on the delivery of physical goods, we care a lot more about a delivery outcome and an experience of
Yeah.
shipping in a subscription channel. And
Yeah.
this is why B2B has a solution in Qpilot for a subscription channel that they typically don't see in other platforms. Is when you make a change to an order in a cart, you're used to be able to, as a customer experience, see those changes reflected as you now have access to these shipping options, and these shipping options can, at least in good customer experiences on a cart, show you like these are the days that you can expect if you choose these options. And this actually has a pretty profound effect in a subscription channel, because in subscription right now, it's all about flexibility and personalization. Well, that means customers are expecting that they get to change things, right? I want to change the date. Like you said, Isaiah, I might want to skip a shipment, delay something. Maybe I want it faster. That's another direction that we've seen some of the brands using Qpilot for, saying, hey, I can actually reduce churn by giving customers faster delivery options, like I do in my shopping cart, that I've never been able to do in a subscription channel. I can reach a wider audience like I can with my shopping cart and my shipping integrations that I've never been able to do in my subscription channel. So this idea that we've implemented of an automated order queue, it allows these integrations that they've already done the hard work to implement them with their cart checkout. It allows them to bring them into their subscription channel with Qpilot.
That's really interesting. So I guess the next question that I would have is, so how do you guys do billing, or is that where they can choose whatever payment gateway they want, or do you partner with payment gateways, or do you also offer that?
Yeah, great question. So I'll have to put a caveat on here. Outside of Shopify, you can choose from over 10 different payment gateways. Those are just integrations with your payment gateway on Qpilot. So it's the same integration that you use to power payments on your cart checkout, right? That same integration is going to seamlessly go into your subscription channel.
Like a PayPal.
With Shopify, it's great in terms of how it functionally works, but it is more constrained into what Shopify will allow, right, for subscription billing. So when you do B2B on Shopify, you have to make a distinction between B2B subscriptions that are working with Shopify subscriptions, which is basically saying you have the access to the Shop Pay payment method, Shopify Payments, and how that controls the checkout experience, which is actually really great on Shopify and excellent in terms of reducing churn because of payment declines and things like that on subscription, because Shopify is really, really good at payments and the experience of payments.
Yeah.
But in B2B, you have to be careful with this expectation of saying, well, do we want to set up subscription on Shopify, or do we want to have a subscription experience but still have the flexibility around payments that oftentimes B2B companies are looking to implement, even inside of a subscription channel?
Yeah. Let's go a little deeper into Shopify. I think Shopify is a really interesting time right now with B2B. It's still early. I think people are still kind of like trying to kind of figure out how to make Shopify work for B2B.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's not something we've talked about a ton on this podcast, just because, historically, a lot of the B2B has been done on, Magento or even BigCommerce, or sometimes even these other big custom or legacy platforms. And we are definitely seeing more B2B being done on Shopify. I guess it's kind of an open-ended question. Like, what are you seeing on Shopify B2B? Do you feel like it's still kind of early? Like, what's your take on it right now, I guess?
Yeah, I still think it's very early. There's definitely been evolution that we've seen with Shopify, where there's a B2B feature set that's now offered in Shopify Plus officially, and it sort of replaced an old set of functionality. There's checkout extensions where your developers can essentially craft a lot of those B2B outcomes for you, where that shopping cart would typically not be very permissive to. If you're on Shopify Plus, you can use extensions to basically implement some of those features that are really important around account-based selling, quantity discounting, things like that. But what we have seen is there have been more applications developed, Shopify apps, like Wholesale Gorilla comes to mind, where a simpler B2B feature set can be implemented without the leveraging of Shopify Plus and custom development on the extension. So I think it's still very early, given that it's been sort of rip and replace for Shopify's official feature set. and they have kind of this new way of doing B2B that they're trying to encourage Shopify stores to use, but there's so little precedent for how it's done that most of these brands and these B2B companies still have to rely on, and they should, agencies and experts that have tested these features out, have tried them, app developers who have leveraged them and either like rationalize them in their apps and are offering them inside of their apps, or are really good at developing with that feature set that Shopify offers in Shopify Plus, where you can customize it.
Yeah, I think it's still really early with, it's only been a little bit that they've had company accounts, price lists. I think now you can have like a custom onboarding form.
Right.
I don't even think we've pushed the envelope at Trellis yet. Like we're still kind of trying to push. Sometimes it's getting people to adopt some of these things that we struggle with. We're like, let's do this. And people are sometimes hesitant to do new things, right? And so I don't think that we've seen the full kind of leverage of all these new things at scale yet, because some of them are so new. And so when it's new, it's like people aren't just immediately adopting all these new features. But I definitely think the next 1 to 3 years, we're going to see quite a bit of innovation coming, whether it's using these new features or like adding on top of them or building kind of apps on top of them, things that you guys probably will be able to do, right? Building,
Absolutely
on top of these things,
Yeah, in fact, one of our integration partners who we love quite a bit, they're integrated with a lot of different shopping carts, including Shopify and Magento, BigCommerce and beyond, Shipper HQ. They recently demoed their use of checkout extensions to do something that we actually think is very important in the subscription channel as well, not just the shopping cart, but is a delivery date selection right in cart. So I think this is something that, again, D2C people like, customers like you and I, when we're buying, it's kind of nice to be shown an option like that. But in B2B purchasing, this is critical. If you can solve that problem for somebody, it's going to motivate them to do their purchasing on your online store, to have that kind of enablement and visibility, to know that you're going to have access to that type of tool. In other words, of saying, oh, I can plan my delivery on here, not just place an order and pray and make phone calls to get it here on time.
Yeah, for sure. What I think that will be interesting, I think you're right, Shopify is amazing at payments. But on the credit card side, I do think if they want to get more serious about B2B, they're going to have to figure out how to do ACH or, because a lot of B2B is done through credit limits and ACH and kind of like not everyone, it's tough to justify a $10,000 order at 3% or what it could be 100,000, some of these B2B orders can be huge, right? And so, and so that most, I think, B2B companies aren't going to want to bring everything online through credit card, right? They're going to want to be able to offer, my guess is they're going to have to figure out some sort of like B2B payments option. What do you think? I mean, this is just speculation, but that's something they're probably going to have to figure out. But who knows? Maybe they just won't. I don't know. So,
I mean, if you think about how some of our merchants are leveraging B2B auto ship or subscription on Shopify, they do tend to have to choose right now. Do you want to go into an approval flow, right, where we're going to draft an order instead of go through the subscriptions process, which kind of sucks that you have to give up the access to the incredible payment options that Shopify can offer. But again, in B2B, they don't tend to put as much stock in that. And they're like, well, we do billing our way. And if we need to do this on the account level and go figure out how to take the ACH payment from that later, that's sometimes where they're turning to their ERP systems, quite honestly, or their OMSs.
Yeah, they're taking the payment like offline or set like almost out of like a separate process. The problem with that is that it's kind of like manual, right? You're kind of losing that value of what I believe B2B e-commerce should become, which is more of a self-serve, all your operations. But
you'd love to see the entire process automated, right? And so that the need for approval can be more focused on certain areas where they need more control. So it's a little bit of a tough compromise in the Shopify space right now because of the lack of access to other alternative payment methods and the lack of eligibility of those payment methods when you want to do subscription. So you have to create, it's a different path when you're doing subscriptions on Shopify for B2B than what you see in D2C.
So many questions honestly are coming to mind, but what do you think is some of the base? I think one of the reasons B2B e-commerce is so hard and complicated, and why I started this podcast is it's harder to quantify the value. Like D2C, I feel like it's very obvious, right? Like we get more ads, we get more ROAS on our ads, we get more sales. Right. Like the math is quite simple in a way. I think with B2B commerce, companies struggle to justify bringing all this stuff online because they don't have as easy of a time justifying the math of, oh, I bring my operations online and maybe I save a little bit of head counts, but like it's more of these like nebulous, I feel like, equations. But I feel like there's this intangible that's being missed, which is just by being more online, you're opening yourself up to so many different value adds, like maybe better marketing, better like sales enablement. Like there's all these kind of like intangible values. What are you seeing, or things that like you're seeing with what you guys do that people maybe underestimate? Like, hey, by just doing this little thing, we saw all these results that you wouldn't expect for like, do you have any kind of like anecdotes around something like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'd say there's two that kind of stand out to me. One is what we saw a lot of. We launched a little bit before the pandemic hit, and there was a lot of a drive all of a sudden to accelerate towards launching an online store. And there was also this other movement that was going on that we saw our B2B merchants doing, where they were launching direct sales channels in addition to their B2B online stores, right? You can imagine why. It's more bottom line type initiative. Hey, we get better margins when we sell direct. So it's kind of this interesting interplay where their appetite for adopting a shopping cart style of selling, an e-commerce style of selling, because of this initiative that was going on, where they're also selling direct with, say, their Shopify store, for example. They're just launching them. Some of them are even spinning up brands in addition to what they were already selling. Some of them already had brands and they're just selling them direct now through their online channels. It gave them an appetite to say, hey, this is really great, because we did it originally because it was margins and we needed a delivery model to sell direct. But now that we've implemented that, now we have an idea of how we're going to transform this other side of our business, which is actually substantially larger than these single channels that they'll spin off for their brands.
For most B2B focused companies, even if they have D2C, it's a smaller channel. And I think it kind of makes sense when you think about it. D2C, for the most part, is roughly only 20% of sales, right? And so unless you're, there are some luxury brands or, some really cool brands that maybe they'll get to 50, but I think, it's highly likely that you should have a solid B2B distribution channel. I mean, even look at Apple, right? Like Apple's highly D2C, but I mean, Verizon, AT&T, that is a B2B distribution channel. Like
absolutely,
most of your phones that you buy and things that you buy from Apple, like not most, but a large chunk are not from Apple. It's through their distribution.
Through distributors. Yeah, absolutely.
They're one of like the premium luxury D2C products that you can get,
Absolutely. Yeah. So like an anecdote about that I could share is, I'll use one in particular that I got to kind of see their entire life cycle from launching a D2C store. And we got to see it obviously through the lens of their subscribe and save, their auto ship program. They launched D2C, and then launching it for their distribution afterwards. It was basically that type of life cycle for them. And we still work with them quite a bit today.
Are you allowed to name them? It's okay if you can't, or if you want to just give
what's that?
Are you allowed to name them, or do you want to just
Yeah, absolutely. There's a case study about them on our website. So happy to share who they are. Yeah, so it's a company named John Ewing, which is a company that owns different kind of pet and equestrian products and brands. So think like supplements that you're going to be administering in the barn, things like that. And
crazy how big companies can be around a specific niche, right? Like
Yeah,
things that you would never think,
absolutely.
like there's like a $500 million company just doing this like one little thing, you know?
Absolutely. And in their space, which I actually know quite a bit about, having worked in some startups in that space as well. They have their direct channel, right, where you're going to come to their website. Usually you're a barn manager or somebody like that, because you have like a barn of, sport horses that you're ordering feed and supplements for. And it's a no-brainer for them to have an online channel for them to make it easy for them to purchase online. And it's also a no-brainer to offer on subscription. Pet supplement type of products do extremely well in subscription channels because of the consumption habit.
Yeah,
And
you kind of know my horse is going to eat roughly whatever per month. And
exactly.
yeah.
So the other thing that's maybe not super unique to their industry, but is in a style of marketing that's very important, is how they actually market their products through different reps and salespeople, veterinary clinics, things like that, retail storefronts they're distributing their products to, right?
Yeah.
So after having launched a D2C channel, then they came out with another online store just for their distributions, right? To both sales reps that are individuals that purchase in large quantities from their website, and storefronts that purchase from them in large quantities, right? Basically purchase orders, but being handled in a subscription channel. So the nice benefit that gives to them is kind of obvious, right? When it comes to subscription, is demand planning, right? They now have a lot, not all, but a lot of their orders from their really important accounts, right? Their important reps, their important vets, their important retail storefronts on a recurring order that they have visibility of. And remember, at Qpilot, this is an order queue. So they're seeing SKUs, right, scheduled for delivery to locations that they have an easier time planning for, and they're managing in the D2C channel not much differently than they're managing on the B2B channel. What's the big difference? Payments.
Yeah.
Right. In the D2C
like
channel,
said,
we're swiping cards.
Purchase order and credit, right? You might give like a vet. I would imagine if I was selling to vets, I might give them net 30 or even net 60. Like that's
exactly
kind of a more common thing in that kind of world,
Exactly. But yeah, when you see the lifetime value expressed in a D2C channel, and you're working on that with essentially retention marketing, you're trying to figure out where the cliffs are and what kind of offers are going to be the most compelling to avoid those cliffs, right? In the B2B channel, they're much less concerned about like looking for those cliffs, and they're much more concerned about demand planning being the reason why it's not going to work, right? If they don't have the stock to fulfill that recurring order, it's true in the D2C channel as well, but they're much more sensitive to it in B2B. Oh, this auto ship on B2B is not working for me. You're not in stock for me. Like,
it's a more critical issue, right? If all of a sudden you can't get 1,000 units, it could break your whole operation and as a B2B organization. So it really has to work. But that's really interesting. So it's almost by just bringing things online, you have a much more centralized digital way of kind of looking at future orders. And something that came to mind that's kind of interesting with Qpilot is like I'd imagine it doesn't necessarily have to be order queuing of the exact same items, right? Could they have future planning of lots of different items?
Yeah.
So is that, I guess this is a question, is that possible to get people to kind of like order more in advance, regardless of whether it's a subscription or the same items?
Absolutely. And that's why it's important to integrate with services that help with actual shipping and fulfillment and delivery, because if you offer a subscription to say a single item, right, that'll get you so far, and that pretty much won't apply much in B2B. Their catalogs tend to be quite a bit larger, and the sizes and products, and especially the sizes of the shipments, are going to vary substantially when you make changes to things. So if you're going to offer flexibility, but you lack the capability to requote things like last mile expectations and shipping rates and costs, somebody's going to eat, a bunch of crap as a result of that on cost, right? Somebody's going to either not going to be able to get the shipping that they wanted, or they're not going to get it at the cost that they thought they should pay. So You see a lot higher mix, I think, in the B2B channel. Certainly you see some pretty large size orders on recurring where it's like one SKU and it's just a really large quantity of it. But that ability to change things and replan, right, that recurring order, it's vital because that's really the job that's to be done by the purchasing or procurement manager, is saying, hey, could we get all of these into the same order? And is that going to help in terms of delivery expectation, in terms of cost, things like that? So all of those tools we consider as really strong sales enablement in the B2B relationship, because otherwise it's people having to figure that out. And our procurement managers, the people that are creating those finished goods and shipping them, they just don't have the time to be worrying about those
They're
things.
dealing with so many different vendors and so much going on. But if they could just like log into, is it John Ewing? Sorry, am I saying that right?
Yeah. Yeah, their brand is like Formula 707, Horse Logic Pro. They got a bunch of brands that are under
I
their
could like
umbrella.
log in and just start planning. Okay, I want my shipment in December. Here's my order shipment for January, and they might be different, right? But I'm like I'm planned out for a quarter, and now like I don't have to think about it, right? Like I can go back and that
Exactly.
sounds amazing if I'm a procurement person to just like be able to go in and just like kind of future plan my orders.
Exactly. And on both sides of that relationship, right? Because as you can imagine, we describe our solution as B2B2C. Every user, every stakeholder has an experience of this on Qpilot. So we have notifications that will let you know as far in advance as we have that data. Hey, you have this scheduled for this time in the future, and right now that's not available. The longer lead time we can give you, especially as the seller on that, the more likely you're going to be able to do something about it and salvage that order in that relationship.
Yep, that makes sense. So I think we there's so much to talk about. You said I think that was the first thing is demand planning. You said there was two.
Yeah.
So what's the
second? Yeah. So I think the second, beyond demand planning, it really is about getting the most value out of omni-channel marketing, right? It's a lot of these brands, kind of as you mentioned, they did this adoption, like in John Ewing Company's case, they knew they wanted to launch a D2C channel to go direct, and when they saw that, right, they then got a lot of inspiration from that to say, like, wait, this could be an experience that a lot of people use. And so they're really maximizing a lot of the work that they had started by implementing it in other channels. So those, frequently when we're talking to a company like this, somebody is directing omni-channel, somebody is managing purchasing in the company, and they are actually the happiest to see the adoption go into B2B, because they see these tools that the D2C channel is using, and they want them, right? They want access to that. And they see the value pretty clearly. Like, hey, this is going to help us spend less time. This is going to make our customers a lot happier. It's going to help us in a lot of different ways. Sure, demand planning being a more obvious one, but that is a big motivator, I think, on business development to convince the leadership of saying, hey, we only tapped some of the value of shopping cart adoption. Now we're going to tap a lot more value by expanding this into other channels. So I think it's those two parts, right? The demand planning is the most obvious because subscription just kind of intuitively means that to people. Oh, it's recurring, it's predictable, right? They like that side of it. But there's already an e-commerce initiative in almost every single company. And it's interesting to see how big of a win that is when they can say, hey, we've actually implemented this in more than just one channel. It's more than just a Shopify store. It's more than just a Magento D2C storefront, right? Now this is actually how more of our channels are working, and we're getting more value out of the tools. Those integrations that we use for the D2C channel shopping cart, we're actually getting more value out of them in other channels too. So I think for people, I think for people working at companies, they like to create those types of wins for their organization.
It makes me feel, I feel like B2B, you brought up marketing as just in this omni-channel, and if you listen to our 100th episode, we had Paula Forno, who's like a really impressive kind of B2B commerce expert at Deloitte Digital, largest kind of agency in our space, doing huge, massive enterprise B2B projects. And he talks a lot about omni-channel. And I think that's really the future of where most of this stuff is going from both a profitability standpoint, like we talked about earlier. Like, it's really hard to be profitable in just one channel and scale.
Yeah.
I think you hit that diminishing return, right? Like, you might be able to be profitable at $1 million, but it might be hard to be profitable at $100 million, right? And then that's why you got to diversify, and you need to have veterinarians, but you also have your D2C, and maybe they have some big, horse race customers that are different for, and you have all these different channels, or Petco, right? Like, who knows? Maybe they also sell to some of the retailers.
Yeah.
And I think that this idea of omni-channel and B2B and B2C, and it's this blurry line. It's like you have this e-commerce kind of digital mothership just tying to as many channels as you can. And there's a risk, right? Like, you want to sell on all channels all at once and break the business. Like, you have to strategically, pick your battles, win your battles, and maybe like move on to the next one once you've hit some scale. But ultimately what I'm getting is, I feel like B2B marketing in kind of all of these firms is kind of broken, marketing and sales. And I feel like they're still operating in this, hey, I'm gonna, get on the golf course. And not that you shouldn't build relationships and cold call or do the old school. I still think there's validity in the old school sales strategies, but I feel like they're way too reliant on that. And they're not realizing how much of buying is happening by people, like a procurement person just Googling. Like, a lot of procurement people, they don't have time to like make a bunch of phone calls. They're just going to Google and find the best B2B experience quickly, right? And so I think a lot of the B2B sales and marketing and lead gen is happening through digital marketing. And I think a lot of these B2B first companies, I think, is a better way to look at it. Like, maybe ones that are traditionally B2B, they might have a little B2C, but they're mostly B2B.
Right.
They're not operating with that mindset. Or if they are, it's like some guy on an island that does a little bit of marketing.
Yeah.
And it's just, they're really underestimating and undervaluing the power of what they could do with potentially Google Shopping, Google Ads, SEO, all this stuff. Like, there's so many, that's why we have this podcast, right? They should have a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Don Ewing, start the equestrian podcast, right? Like, I know it's not funny, but like, that's how people might find them in today's world versus like trying to email and cold call. It's hard, man. Like, I mean, I'm sure you've dealt with it, right? The outbound approach it's not easy anymore,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's transforming observably faster now than before. But I think you're right. There's a new generation of purchaser, and they do things a different way. They've had online shopping their whole lives, right? So of course they think about Google and Amazon as great resources for this. And if we just take the Amazon precedent, which is arguably the easiest way to explain like who made Subscribe and Save popular, right? At least in the US, is Amazon. 2 years ago they launched basically what is Subscribe and Save in Amazon Business Marketplace.
Yeah.
Right. So these B2B companies, where I'm not that they weren't aware of Amazon or anything like that, they were probably selling on Amazon, a lot of them. But this idea of saying like, what else can Amazon touch that's not going to be sacred to us? Like, what kind of marketing are we going to be able to do that's going to keep us relevant, right, moving forward? I mean, it's something we're betting on at Qpilot. Is like that transformation is going to continue, and it's just going to get faster. And one of those things that has become ubiquitous almost in D2C, which is, I mean, go to any consumer good website, you're going to see some kind of subscription option, whether it's a box or a Subscribe and Save to an individual product. We think that that's going to be ubiquitous in B2B as well. If you don't have this type of convenience, right? For me,
you need it for validation and marketing. And like, I mean, if I go to a website and it sucks and I don't feel like they have all these features like that, I'm going to judge you like, and and I think that's what people don't realize is like millennials, some of them are 40 years old. Like, it's like, oh yeah, the millennials, like, or whatever, like this new generation. It's like a lot of these people that are 40, 45, like they've been
Yeah,
buying online for 10, 20 years. Like they had Windows 95. Like that's that Windows 95 is going to be 30 years old soon. Think about that. Like,
exactly.
and I remember when I was a young kid when I had Windows 95, but like it was pretty powerful. Like I could do a lot as a kid on Windows
Yeah,
95. Like I could, yeah, it was crappy compared to what I have right now on my MacBook Pro, but like I could open up the browser, I could play video games, I could like do
right.
normal computer operating on what you don't need to, I think, pre Windows 95 it was a lot harder to operate a computer, but it's 30 years we're talking at this point.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
I just think that B2B sales and marketing is kind of broken.
Right.
I'm blanking out his name. He's actually based out of Boston, because we're kind of Boston-based company, although we have a few people in Denver and we've got a decent Colorado kind of remote folks out there. So maybe one of
Yeah,
these you'll get to meet them. But he talks about like dark social, or like how B2B, especially in SaaS companies, is also broken, where they're just hiring this army of SDRs. And I think this is very relevant to all B2B. Is
yeah,
they hired this army of SDRs, and because of the funding craze, it kind of got hidden how unprofitable it was. But when you actually like peel back the layers of some of these B2B marketing tactics, like the paybacks on these SDRs and the way that they were operating was so unprofitable. And they're putting, they weren't putting good sales reps on the good inbound leads that had high close rates, and which was a mistake, because someone ready to buy that's educated is much different than a cold outreach lead that's maybe not so serious.
yeah.
Right? So it was just interesting to see how he feels. If you read his LinkedIn posts, sorry, I'm blanking on his name. I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but he talks about just kind of this, how it's just all broken, right? And he goes in and sees how like their ads aren't, they're spending way too much money on sales and marketing. It's just all broken in B2B. And I bet if you peeled back the layers of most legacy B2B companies, legacy meaning they've been around for,
Right.
let's say 10, 20 or 30 plus years, you'd probably find some pretty inefficient sales and marketing tactics, right? In terms of the cost structure and the results.
I mean, you can be pretty surprised. Like, I won't say their name because I'm going to make fun of their website a little bit, but we have some cleaning supply sellers which do really, really well on these types of B2B auto ship programs, right? MRO is a great category to implement subscription for B2B. But yeah, it's kind of alarming sometimes. You go to the site, you're like, this can't be converting anybody. Like, this looks really bad. It looks like a site from yesteryear. But it's kind of a reminder of like, hey, there are some companies that have been around a long time, have massive customer bases, and digital transformation, they kind of get to be a laggard, but only for so long, right?
How
These
long is that going to
marketplaces,
last?
exactly.
How long is this kind of ignorance, in my opinion, of just being able to get away with the status quo digitally going to last, right? For some of these
Right.
companies, they're not.
Yeah, we'll see. Like we have kind of a discussion inside of our team because of our vision, right? Our vision is to be the most flexible repeat delivery automation platform powering all subscriptions.
Yeah.
Essentially, all subscription channels should be using really good delivery automation, because getting the product is a huge part, right, of actually a purchase experience. So, we kind of had this theory that, kind of spinning off of what Larry Page and Sergey Brin at Google used to say, probably like 6-7 years ago, is the internet's going to disappear, right? It's disappearing. It's becoming the fabric of communication inside of everything. And at Qpilot, we take that to mean like IoT quite a bit, and saying, well, a purchase experience is on a website right now, primarily, right? Email notifications, text message to let you know that you need to go onto a website to go manage something, or get into an app to go manage a purchase order. But these B2B companies are in a better position, in my opinion, than D2C to take advantage of more of that type of adoption, where devices and computing on the edge can better manage the maintenance, the replenishment, the needs that are recurring, right? And then this is a horrible use of human time to keep track of these things. So whether those websites that I'm making fun of right now really matter in the long run, maybe not. But the ability for these B2B companies to keep pace with these companies like Amazon, for example, who have had this vision for a long time. I mean, let's talk about the HP printers that reorder their own ink. That's been around since like 2007, 2008. That is not a new model.
Caterpillar is doing this with their machines. You can register machines, and it's like an IoT Caterpillar onto their website. They were a big speaker at one of the B2B commerce. Like, they're investing in this,
Exactly. So I think B2B companies are in actually the best position to take advantage of that. But if they're slow with their adoption, right? And right now that adoption curve kind of looks like you better be able to at least launch an online channel of some kind, right?
Yeah.
If they're slow with that,
like now,
my concern for them is, unlike some of the more sophisticated or progressive, you might say, B2B brands that are adopting new styles of marketing, they might get displaced simply by the pace of technology that says, actually, this isn't even going to happen on an online store. Once we've connected in this way, we don't need you to go online and shop anymore. So trying to remove customers from shopping, that is the end goal, right? Amazon doesn't want you to shop. That's a mistake if people think that about Amazon's market, but they don't want you to shop. They want you reliant on their replenishment model. So if you're a B2B brand, you should be going for that, right, as your MO for 5 years from now.
Literally just happens. You just get what you need, right? You have this IoT fridge that automatically reorders the food that you need when you need it. And yeah, I agree. I think we're moving in that direction. I think some of that will take a little bit longer depending on the market,
right?
But, and what the use case is. But I do agree that, like, just this whole digital enablement and automation is happening very fast. And I think if companies kind of resist it for too long, there's kind of like a point of no return, I think, on some of them. Where the ones that are ahead of them will just be so far ahead, and they'll be iterating faster and faster and faster because they get better and better. And then they're going to be going at 100 miles an hour. And if you're going at like 1 mile an hour, like, think about the distance just keeps growing every second, and
exactly.
At some point, even if you get to 100 miles an hour, you're so far behind, you can't catch up, right? Because they were ahead of you for so long. And and I think we're seeing that kind of play out a little bit in some cases.
Oh yeah, big time. You're starting to see that transform. Ourselves, we're starting to see it as consumers. There's some products that work this way already, right? Even from a long time ago that worked this way, right? And I think what we're seeing more and more is, as the technology of the internet is implemented and integrated into all kinds of different devices, where you and I might be making fun of a website right now, right? The youngest generation of purchasers are going to be looking at you really confused as to why you would make them go onto a website to manage a repeat order. Like, what are we doing here? That's not what the internet does. Right? So these expectations are evolving. I believe they're accelerating very quickly right now. And this technology that has kind of been nascent for a bit in terms of the e-commerce aspect, I think it's poised, and the bandwidth is there, the availability is there, and I think the appetite is now there to start removing customers from shopping.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that there's a cultural thing here? Like, I think one thing I've noticed is that B2B organizations, they often have very slow decision-making processes and kind of deliberate over these decisions. And I think part of that is they've been burned through like these legacy ERP implementations that, going back to your world, where like those projects are pretty difficult, right? It's not easy to implement an ERP, and it's kind of this all or nothing software. And I think they come a lot from that world, and then it makes it hard for them to think of this new world, which is a little more agile and able to move a little bit faster, maybe more iterative software development kind of cycles. You think there's almost like a cultural component there that can make that challenging for them to figure that gap out?
Cultural, yeah, maybe. I don't know if I've described it as cultural before, but that's interesting. But yeah, where we see it from our perspective at Qpilot is because we do shipping integrations. So sometimes when they're learning about how this is implemented in a subscription channel, they will, and they meaning the operators, the business owners that are implementing the software, they will sort of disappear for a little bit and basically come back and let us know what they were figuring out. It's like, hey, we were being recommended, and this seems very typical to the B2B channel, by our 3PLs, by the people that were using to like run our logistics in the business, this software, that software. And it's changing from what I'm saying. Maybe this is the culture aspect. I think it used to just be like, if you refer them and you're part of my fulfillment network, I'm basically just, that's enough for me. I'm going to go adopt this. Yeah. And now you have a younger generation that just has a bigger appetite to go research things and check things out for themselves information wise. And that reference alone is not necessarily good enough. There's an appetite to try other things that are out there, and there's a lot of competition in these different spaces for different solutions providers. So yeah, it seems, at least in terms of the software selection and the vendor selection that we're privy to, you're seeing kind of this shift from, well, this like person told me that I trust, and I use them for something completely different than software or something like that, to use something else. And they're still asking questions. That wasn't enough for them. So I think maybe that might be the cultural aspect that we've seen.
Shifting, right? They're almost like more curious and more interested to learn what's really all the options that are out there.
Yeah.
But I think that becomes this conflict with maybe the old way of doing things, and they could get slowed down by the bureaucracy of like, hey, well, wait a minute, I got to evaluate these 10 things.
Yeah, decision overload.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of, I also think that like a lot of B2B isn't sexy. And so I think that culturally, it's a big opportunity, but I think there's not a lot of people like you that are kind of bringing like modern technology to B2B in this way. And I think a lot of kids are kind of like sold on, like, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be like, work at like the sexy, like, I don't know, right, Apple or Facebook or these kind of like trendy companies. So I think that's going to be a challenge, is getting, younger talent into these organizations, because they're not, they don't sound cool, even though the opportunity I think is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. My hope is that more kids will have experiences, maybe not exactly like mine, but one of the things that has inspired me a lot is getting to work alongside business owners and working in mid-sized businesses, small-sized businesses. You get to see a lot of the blood on the ground of like how the product gets made, how it gets shipped, those types of things. And it's not for everybody, but there's a lot of, I know Americans out there and in other countries where people are really resourceful and industrious, and you throw them in an environment like that and it's exciting for them. So is getting a product from A to B super sexy? No. But is it really, really cool to see a business operate well for a certain kind of person out there? That's a big deal. It brings a big smile to their face. It gets them out of bed every day. They want to see that system
very productive,
run on, and they want to see it scale.
Yeah, it's highly productive and useful, right? It's not necessarily cool, but it's like the backbone of the economy, right? All these things you don't realize are happening. Like, I think you see it during COVID. People like, supply chain. What's the supply chain? Like, what happens when the supply chain shuts down? It really sucks. It really sucks, and we're still seeing the effects of that, right? Like, I still think, we're probably.
It was funny seeing whose mouth the word supply chain was coming out of during the pandemic.
Yeah, people that I'd never thought about it, or it's like things are always available all the time. Like, that's just the world that most of us have grown up in. And when you see that disrupted, it's pretty crazy, right? But that's because there's all this complex stuff happening behind the scenes,
Yeah.
Kind of coming towards the end here, I'd love to just get maybe some parting wisdom or thoughts or predictions, just anything that you think would be interesting for people to think about in this space that you see.
Yeah, I mean, certainly where our vision is where we have a lot of our philosophy and our predictions about the future. And I think in the not so distant future, right, what we're really trying to bring in a big way to the market that's transformative is that in recurring orders, especially, right, and we have partners that are really good at this that we integrate with as well. We want our purchasers focused on the delivery outcomes and not the billing dates of these previous ways of doing subscription. This is a necessary evolution in the recurring order channel and the subscription channel. Some brands do it, right? Some brands will go through the work themselves, but this is where SaaS companies can help. This is where shipping integrations are already helping in the cart checkout. And bringing an experience of delivery into the subscription channel is really not just cool, but it's important. The appetite, this is a not so bold prediction for me because it's already happening. The appetite to just give shipping away and hope it gets there within a reasonable amount of time, that's going away, right? The customer's more sophisticated. If you give them more options, it's actually not too many options. We don't decision overload, it's a balance there. But we already seen this improve conversion rates at checkout, where customers can have an options around when they want something and how much they'll pay for how fast they can get it. And this is just going to get more prolific, right? So seeing that transformation in the subscription channel, that's a change that we're really focused on bringing about to the market. And we think it's an important one. And then I think that's going to do a couple of nice things for us. One, it's going to help our supply chain in the B2B context, because now that we're managing when something is actually landed and I can use it instead of ordering it on, say, like a subscription model that doesn't give you any visibility into that, it's actually going to make that demand planning and close the loop on it in a way that does make the supply chain a little bit more predictable.
Yeah, right? And more efficient, because you don't overbuy or underbuy. And
exactly,
I think we saw a lot of that with COVID. I mean, I've talked to some companies that they couldn't get what they need fast enough during the spike in demand, and then they overbought because now, you know, demand's back down, or people bought everything they needed and they don't want to buy as frequently anymore, because some of these things, you know, are maybe larger one-time purchases or bed, right? Like you're probably not going to buy a bed every 6 months, right? So like things like that. So now they're stuck with too much inventory because they over planned first.
Exactly. And with that visibility, I think what we'll continue to see in the e-commerce space is the rise of, whether it's AI enabled or not, the digitally assisted shopper, right? Where they're not making their purchase decisions completely on their own. There are applications that are helping them, whether that's a personal AI, whether it's a service they're using, but they are being assisted in things that, again, I'm going to use this kind of phrase, in things they don't really want to be spending their time on, right? Like repeat purchasing.
Yeah.
So you're going to see a lot more of this appetite of saying, wait, what kind of assistants can I use? What kind of AIs can I use to help me with these decisions, right? Can I establish more of an integrated approach where I don't have to be the one going myself and managing a purchase order? Could I actually let my subscription service or the brand that's offering me a subscription integrate into, say, my Google Calendar, so that they can help predict some of these adjustments for me, right? A more assisted sales process that way. This idea of self-service is really good, but there's still a lot of decisions that need to be made and evaluated based on where people are, what kind of changes are disrupting deliveries and times, right, in the supply chain. So you're going to see a lot more of this sophistication. I think on the delivery side, it's already happening, where you're seeing this type of communication happen, where there's some kind of disruption and they're communicating that to the people that are shipping, right? Hey, you need to replan because of this disruption. And I think on the purchaser side, you're going to see more and more of this assisted buying decisions going on, where a lot of different tools are being developed and are already in the market that are helping them make a decision more and more autonomously than when they would just have to think about all the factors on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, embedding this into the IoT world, which will continue to improve. And like, I think of like my smart locks, like auto delivering batteries, right? Like that's a really annoying thing. You always run out of batteries, and like stuff like that. So it makes a lot of sense, and I'm excited to see where this all goes. And we'll definitely want to have you back in a year or two. We're going to start bringing more people back, because it's like we see the evolution of what we talked about from before and after. So yeah, really appreciate your time, and honestly got me thinking. I learned a lot, just the idea of like almost rethinking my mind around subscription as delivery planning. Future deliveries is almost a better way to think about it versus payments, right? Payments is one thing, but future deliveries and recurring delivery is they're almost, from a technical perspective, they should be treated as like two different objects, you know. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, really appreciate you, and we'll definitely have you back.
Thank you so much, Isaiah. It was a pleasure being on here.